Dark's Humming came out of a project I was working on about madness. And I was working with a writing partner, a really beautiful writer and editor, John Bellinger, and we kind of dove into this together and started researching. And I started reading a lot about hysteria and postpartum depression with women, and I couldn't stop reading it. And I had these mythologies that had kind of run through my childhood, and they were warnings that my parents had given me, or my mom had given me, that were more like cautionary tales. So I started researching and reading about postpartum depression. I knew I was in the right spot and had to write a book about it. For those who are familiar with Goodreads, if you Google motherhood, there are 838 quotes that pop up. And the very first one is J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye, and that mothers are all slightly insane. It's the first one. And then if you type in motherhood and depression or postpartum depression, there isn't a single quote that pops up. And so I knew I was called to writing this book. So happy to share this with you this evening. Sorry if I take a little long to find the pages. Working with one arm. They did that to me here in Flagstaff. Great doctor. If anyone's interested, I have a recommendation. Shiny new shoulder. Stay. All right. Warning. I inherited a color, gray, and a gene that frays once a baby arrives. As a child, I prepared, painted every surface cyan, kept jars of indigo beads in the window, learned a slow waltz I could do at the lip of the hospital roof, gown flapping like a flag. My facility was named after a saint, smelled of sulfur and cotton, fresh pairs of orange traction socks to keep from slipping on the always just washed floor. It's an imbalance, they explained. So surely I'd fall at the lip of anything or shift into the place of lead and ash. My grandmother is the only one I know who escaped. Her hair, a brilliant white, turned early and has refused to fade, even as her body continues to shrink into sleep-filled days. When I lean in to give her a kiss, she whispers that the light is too bright. I'm not sure if she is talking about the musty daylight filtering through the covered window or speaking to the sepia ghost that adorn her walls. When I turn to leave, she squints, as if behind a windshield, driving headlong into the sun. Thank you. So the ending of that poem for me really hits home, because a lot of times when we see something that's difficult or somebody who's having a struggle, we tend to squint and look away. And as the historical fiction writer Kaman Kajori said, do not avert your eyes. It is important that you see this. It is important that you feel this. And in researching and writing for this book, I kept that kind of quote in the back of my mind, because so much of it, as a mother and a female, was really difficult to read and to look at and to know and have that history in my own blood. And so I felt it was important not to look away. Grass stars. I was pregnant in a patchwork dress, and the days shivered yellow, as if I were concealing a secret that could unravel an entire field of grass stars. I was faultless. Then I burst, and we fell into these stuck places. I read and read, but speaking came hard when the walls were the only texture, and people's voices forgot to remind me that I was something other than a charcoal-etched list, a tender honeydew, an udder. The baby coos cuteness and need. We dance by the night window until she forgets to cry. I whisper the kinds of sadness splayed in the news, and she sleeps. If I never set her down, Her dreams will prepare her for this world, how to always flourish in motion, how to crave lightness, death. I am busy being her cradle. When I glued the cat's paws to the floor, it wasn't out of spite for its constant yowl, its pathetic heat. I just couldn't be another post to rub against, another fixture in these rooms. The doctor says my sadness can be bright, the way berries plump under the burnt crust. They swell and glisten. He says there's a little pill that can make the world go from harried and dumb to air-crisped and floaty. A full bottle could make me kind. I light the stove and crave its warmth, the thick lullaby that swims and swallows my lungs. I really love the clapping. It's pretty awesome. For anyone who's had a newborn out here, this one's for you. Newborn. His fevered cry rises like rosemary dough throughout the house, astringent, hoarse, unaffected by binding his body to my breast, rubbing his back and legs with oils. I asked my grandmother's ghosts for the leaves and vines she dried on the kitchen table when I was little and blistered, still deciding how long to stay. Oregano for a toothache, warm pressed olive oil in ears, a cracked egg underneath the bed to ward off dark dreams. But I've long forgotten the dialect of newborn suffering. I work circles around his calves and thighs, worried he was born with my hue of anger, the kind that stunts roots, makes them recoil from barbing into the just tilled earth. Thank you. So when I was writing this book, for a long time, I thought it was going to be called the lying in room, which is the room where they put newborns and their mothers just after giving birth. And it's supposed to be a period of respite, so to restore and regain their strength and health. But I can't even imagine how isolating that must have been. I mean, your entire world just shifted and changed, and here you're kept in a room away from everybody that you know, and your normal life is completely stripped away, making new motherhood that much more difficult. And so I thought this book was going to be called that, but it ended up being called The Dark's Humming, which is also in this poem. It worked out quite well, I think. So the lying in room. Recognize death like paper walls, the rain and haze condensing on windows. From outside, you can't see the soul of what's walking around, dazed in underwear. Inside, there's a disquiet, a thin wail, a surrender. You think it's coming from the wood slats or the roof tiles crying under the weight of it, but it's not. So you keep bumping into counters and corners that haven't shifted in years, not because of the dark's humming, but because you've lost the feel for air, taut and fluid at once, swimming in the static all around. Thank you. So, this is my new chapbook. It's really pretty. It's for sale. It is entitled 1,000 Paper Cranes, after the Japanese legend that if you fold 1,000 origami cranes, you get a single wish. And I started writing this, and I knew it was going to be a chapbook. I knew it wasn't going to become a full length. But I started writing it when my own mother had a little bit of a cancer scare with her eye. And I was thinking, as a fairly new mother raising 2 kids, if I could make one wish, it would be to keep my own mother around. So instead, I wrote these poems. 1,000 cranes a wish. You were given a single piece of paper. You cannot cut or tab unwilling corners into place with glue. You are told to make a wax moon, a perched swallow, a lamp. You remember watching your mother rise from her bed in an hour that folded the light, the amber rimpled sheets. You remember that shadows are seamless. You cannot be haunted by fragments. You want the center to announce itself, to yaw the way still water undresses for a body, to ruffle outward, to filigree. You remember how she slept, the thinnest sheet resting over her face, a crocus, the slender silk of spring, damp tapered leaves and scrub. Thank you. Do I have time for one more? All right. So I couldn't stop actually writing about origami. I've never actually made a piece of origami. It's no lie. And someday I will, and I'll probably get really frustrated and love it far less. That's how it works, right? But looking at these just absolutely stunning images and playing with the idea that once you do fold a piece of paper, its memory is changed and shifted forever and becomes something else entirely, just captivated me. And so I have another book that I wrote, and it's in progress. And it's a lot of origami poems and poems about salt, and I don't cook, so I mean, those who can't do right, I guess, yeah? So this poem, Paper Mother, was published in the Nimrod International Journal, and it was a semifinalist for the Pablo Neruda Prize for Poetry, which made me happy because I actually got to see Pablo Neruda's desk earlier on. It was amazing. He had a giant picture of Walt Whitman above it, though, which kind of weirded me out. It's like, really, Pablo? All right. That works. So, long way to this poem, but Paper Mother. The instructor chooses a pink square, numbs his hands enough for us to follow, speaks the language of folds, mountains, and valleys. This is my therapy, salvaging a room of scraps that bend, graceful as blood cuts, lining my fingertips from grasping too quickly. Today, I choose a pale, unwanted piece, pre-creased, another's failed attempt at nestling the lip against the line. He explains, a single sheet makes both mother and child, is elemental, unfettered. To ensure it doesn't drift too far, we secure it with a clip. But first, we collapse and hush layers to make newborn creases, joke about how a cup of water could be our entire undoing, and I'm there, as quickly as she's not. Her glass by the bedside table I could not bear to move. Dingy ring, the color of jasmine, then straw, a single dried smear. Tomorrow, he promises, we will add a star-shaped flower to her hair. Thank you. Thank you for listening. I have books over at the table if you're interested, and I have a little card reader if you didn't bring cash. We got this, no problem. Thank you.